much. Verse of scripture that I shared with you, I think I've spoken at two pops. One was the very first one we did several years ago, and then another one here a couple of years ago. And I led with this verse of scripture in both of those because it's one of those verses that kind of had got into me. And over time, I've never been able to fully unpack what it means. Jesus said very truly, whoever believes in me will do the works I've been doing, and they will do even greater things than these. I don't know how young I was, but it was a long time ago when I thought, if that's true, I want some. I want to be part of something that is greater than a program, greater than some kind of a strategy. I want to be part of God's strategy. I want to be part of a kingdom movement. And I want to see that. Now you mix that with a few years ago, my kids, my son Nick, calling me and saying, Dad, there's a podcast you got to listen to. And I'm like, okay. And usually that's something about how boomers are doing it all wrong. That's not true. He's helpful. But it was Jocko Willink. And Jocko wrote a book that I'm going to reference a little bit. He's a former Navy SEAL. The title of the book is Extreme Ownership, and I'll talk about that. But Jocko does this thing where he says, when the team was ready to move on mission, they were trained, they were in location, that some radio operator would come across and just signal to everybody, stand by to get some. And it both referenced the fact that they were about to do their mission, but it also references the fact that you're about to be in a mess. that your nose is going to get bloodied, and there's going to be stuff that happens, and it's going to get confusing, and it's not going to be comfortable. And when that happens, you just look at each other and go, well, we got some. And so that has become something for me that I mix here, because if we want the greater things, we're going to have to be willing to take the greater steps and make the greater risks and ask God to give us the greater faith, make the greater sacrifices. And so that's kind of how we begin. So I had an interesting moment. This works. Yeah, there it is. In my last Easter at Chicago First. On Good Friday, we had like 4 stations across the front of the church for several hours, and people could come in, as they were available, and go to one of the tables, and one of our pastors would serve them communion as a family, and so that was kind of how we did it. And I was on this end, and then Pastor Bob Brown, and he was our resident academic. Bob taught at the university level, and he was just an amazing, valuable person to me. A few years older, but just such an incredible asset. And then on down was Phil and Galen and Deb, who's a friend of mine, who's attended the church for many years, in her 40s, a unique individual, no filter with Deb. She just kind of will tell you what she thinks. She comes down and she stands in front of me. Now Bob's got people, everybody else has people, and there's nobody at my table. And so I see her and I smile, and she smiles. She goes, hi. I said, hi. She said, I'm actually waiting for Pastor Bob. He's my favorite pastor. I said, okay, you know what, Deb, he's my favorite pastor too. I like Pastor Bob. And then since we had time to kill, because I didn't have anybody and Bob was busy, being everybody's favorite pastor, didn't bother me a bit. Deb come up and started talking. And she said, can I tell you something? And I said, sure. She said, I've been going once in a while with my mom to her Catholic church, and you're kind of boring. And I said, oh. She goes, yeah. She goes, don't take it personal. I'm like, Deb, and I know Deb, and I'm like, I understand. I said, why, what makes you? She goes, well, I go to sleep every time you start talking. And she said, and so maybe if you would build into your sermon some kneeling and standing and kneeling, it would be helpful. I'm just telling you. Because I'm just like, boom, I'm just out. And I don't know what it is. And I said, well, Deb, thank you. I'll work on that. And then, so eventually Bob opened up and she went and had communion. Sunday, she brought me a note that she had written. And I will keep this forever. And she said, I wrote down a few things I think might be helpful. All right, I'll take that. She said, every once in a while, you need to shout out, can I get an amen? All right. Every once in a while, you could shout out, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Okay? She said, maybe in the middle of your message, you could say, if you love Jesus, please stand up. And then she wrote, I'm feeling good. I knew that I would now. And she whited it out and said, don't say that because that's a song. You could shout out, I'm feeling good because I do love Jesus now. All right. And then this is my favorite part. She said, you can always call on me and say, Deb, wake up. And whether I'm asleep or not, just say it anyway. And I'll jump out of my chair and yell out, Jesus is coming, or whatever comes to my mind. I was only there a few weeks. We had some vacation, and so I never got a chance to preach with Deb. But if Galen ever invites me back, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? What ministry brings us. And I do appreciate Deb. I love Deb. And it was just fun. Along with what I wanted to share with you today, and I met with the team that talks about POPs, and they suggested that I kind of just share with you my heart today and kind of what's going on. And so I'm grateful for that opportunity. It's going to be kind of a dump truck, and so we're going to go fast, but I'm going to give it to you. On June 23rd, I sent the District Advisory Board a copy of what I refer to as Plan 131, which was 131 days from the time I began till November 1st. And it was a 131-day plan for getting here. I've transitioned, and I haven't transitioned a lot, but I've transitioned enough to know that I need to really do these four things. I need to land, I need to listen, I need to learn, and where I need to lead, I need to lead. One of the principles I have that I kind of try to adhere to is that in the early days, you don't make any decisions that you don't have to make. Now, there are some decisions you have to make, but anytime you walk into a new opportunity that seems like there's a whole bunch of low fruit, that you can go, we should do this, and there's always people going, we should do this, and you go, yeah, we should do this, and then I've spent the next year trying to undo a bunch of things that I did because I wasn't listening. If you want a copy of that plan, I'd be happy to send you one if you'll email me and ask for it. There's nothing terribly exciting in it, but it includes a few things that I'm thinking about. So even this gathering today is part of land, listen, learn, and lead. In the process of that, I haven't been for training yet. I do that in a couple of weeks. I go to Kansas City, where I don't know if I get the tattoo and drink the Kool-Aid or whatever it is, or get the jacket. Jeff was teasing me about my jacket, but they did send Eddie Estep up to spend a day and a half with me and talk about ministry, and I was blown away by the fact, because I don't know what I'm going to hear. He spent a day and a half with me, and he was talking about people. He was talking about you. He was talking about your churches. He was talking about the role of the district superintendent. And so he pointed me to several passages of scripture, scripture from the manual. I'm already there, man. From the manual, a district is defined as an entity made up of interdependent local churches. organized to facilitate the mission of each local church through the mutual support, sharing resources, and collaboration. That word is interdependent. We are not alone. We're a team. We have to be a team. And in this room right now, there are no large church pastors or small church pastors. There are pastors. And every single one of us is part of a team, and we will succeed as a team. I've never met a pastor, regardless of the size of the church they were pastoring or how long they've been in ministry, that I couldn't learn something from and benefit from. When you see me in any kind of a gathering where somebody's speaking, pretty rare that I'm not taking notes. And I'm not taking notes for any other reason than I need to hear what I can learn. We are interdependent. It doesn't matter what the second baseman's batting average is, or how good the pitcher is. The team doesn't win. You don't get a World Series ring. You don't get the ultimate prize in baseball or any other sport unless you win as a team. And we need to win in your location. We'll talk about what that means. We define that. We want to be faithful. We want to live into our brand, live into what it means to be a part of the Church of the Nazarene, where we are. We are interdependent. You are needed. That's why I appreciate those of you who are joining online and those of you who are in the room for being part of this POPS. Because you're needed. We need to hear your stories. Greg Mason was leading on the Northwest Illinois District in about 2004 or 5 when we started POPS there. And I was a pastor was there. And the group that I would sit with often, we would have a moment alone and it'd be like, well, who's checked, in those days it was who's checked the want ads this week for looking for another job, right? I mean, because we would come in and we needed each other, and we need this environment. If you allow the Lord to, He will speak to you in this environment. So we're interdependent. We're not going to do this individually or by ourselves. We're going to do it together. Another thing that I noticed from Created for Mission by Crocker and Broadbooks, districts are more than structures for bureaucratic layers. Districts are agencies of the church created for mission, strategy, synergy, and unity. Districts are an agent of mission. I'm not here to do paperwork. I'm not here to police anybody. Sometimes we'll do paperwork, and I guess if there's a policeman needed, we'll figure it out. But by and large, we are here to do something together. We are agents of mission. Mission strategy, synergy. We are far more important to each other than we realize. Moving in the same direction, agenda harmony, common language, all of those things that can be helpful to us. And then I'm going to talk about unity in just a little bit. What's the job of a DS? I posted this, this is hanging on my wall. We are agreed on the necessity of a superintendency that shall, the necessity of a superintendency that shall, not just the necessity of a superintendency, but this is why it's necessary. Assist the local church in fulfilling of its mission and objectives. The superintendency shall build morale, provide motivation, supply management and method assistance, and organize and encourage organization of new churches and missions everywhere. The role of district leadership is to help you fulfill yours. I'm not going to come to your church with a mission and vision. I'm going to come and help you execute and fulfill out your mission and vision, which means you need to have a mission and vision. And we can help with that. That's part of what we can help you kind of uncover and unpack and come. But the district is not going to make a church successful. The district can help a church, and we want to do that. So just some outlines on where we are. What I want you to think about is, what is the contextualized mission of your local church? Matthew 28 gives us a pretty good mission statement, right? We're to make disciples, right? And I hope that whatever local mission statement that we come up with, it kind of resembles that. I think it should, some version of that. We know the denominations to make disciples in the nations, and so all that is true. But there's also a time and a place for contextualized mission statement. A unique calling on a given body or family. I was in Edinburgh this last week, and I drove in. I mean, have you been to Edinburgh? Oh man, it's a beautiful town, only about 4,500 people, but there's thousands that are in the area. And I called my wife, and I'm like, I feel like I'm on vacation. She says, you're not on vacation, you get to work. So she didn't actually say that. But I'm downtown, and they've remodeled this downtown in Edinburgh. I mean, it's historic, and it's beautiful. And I drive out to the church, and there's I was there 2 hours early, and there was a girls softball tournament that was going on at the park right next. The cars were backed up, and I mean, there was so much life in this community, and there were churches all over the place. I mean, it was wonderful. I just loved being there. And then I went to Casey's, and I went in to use the bathroom, and there was a receptacle for used needles. I went, what? In Edinburgh? In downtown Indy, right, or something like that? Or some of the other places in Edinburgh? I go to the church, and you know what the most active ministry in their church is right now? Celebrate Recovery. They meet twice a week. They have 2 big meetings a week. I left there with fentanyl test strips because they've handed them out in the community the week before, so that you can test. I don't know fully how to use it. I'm gonna ask Phil how to use it on. I don't know fully how to use it, but it's to make sure that you know the people who are taking drugs, because fentanyl's in it and it'll kill you. And Narcan, a little Narcan kit. That's contextualizing and saying Jesus is in town, and there's a need, and he's going to address that need. So that's really important, because if we're about saving the world, well, I know exactly what that means, right? So contextualizing, and then you'll hear me talk a lot about the mission of the moment. A mission is a wonderful thing to have. We should all have that. So what are we doing today? A mission is what the plan is for your ministry the next 90 to 120 days. What do we need to accomplish in the next 3 months, 4 months, between now and the end of the year? What do we need to get done? It's going to be real easy to see if we're on mission or not a year from now. We're not going to wait till we see metrics come in that may or may not be applicable. Are we taking steps on mission? Are we learning what we need to learn? Are we doing the stuff we need to do? Are we continuing to postpone doing, right? So mission of the moment is critical to execution. My experience has been, I don't know that I've ever had a lack of ideas for church, for growth, or any of that kind of stuff, because I read a lot, and I go to a lot of places, and I listen to pastors, and the difference is not do we have the idea, the difference is do we execute? Are we taking the steps, right? So mission of the moment is something that we'll talk about. Now, I'm going to bring some larger ideas on November 1st when I give to the advisory board kind of what my plan, the directions that I think we should go in 2023. This is just stuff that I'm discovering as I go. But be prepared. At some point, I may ask you, what's your mission of the moment? And I'm not quizzing you. I'm not doing that. I just want to help. And so, by the way, mission of the moment is critical to relationships. What's your mission of the moment with your middle schooler? In our marriages, right? How would life change if we begin to say, you know what? There are some relationships that I have that I need to get strategic. I was pastoring in Elgin, 1996 probably, And we were going through some just incredible times, and church was growing. I had a plan and presented the plan, and everybody was gracious. And I had a business leader named Hugh Scott. Hugh's from Georgia and teaches at a university down there now. And Hugh said, Pastor, I feel, and we spent time together. He earned the right. He said, are you as strategic about your family as you are about your church? Right? So don't operate professionally and vocationally in a strategic way and not do that, right? And I've done it. I've made those mistakes. Come on, baby. There we go. It's 2022. The pandemic didn't change the world. That's kind of a big statement, but we do need to realize that. It didn't change the world. It was a signal of the change already happening in the world. It's not like we were all unified and now we're not. No, British historian Adam Tooze described the pandemic as a way station on an ascending curve of radical change. Noting that for better or worse, there is no escaping the fact that big things are going to happen. The continuation of the status quo is the one option we do not have. We are not standing still. What you hold, you cannot keep. Where you are, you cannot stay. And so as we think about moving, this is a great book, by the way, A Non-Anxious Presence. I have a counselor friend, which is code for my counselor, who has coached me over the years about this idea of being a non-anxious presence. And I can be kind of an anxious presence because I kind of get worked up and I get excited and I get passionate. And but I have learned over the years that the people who change the world are the people who are a non-anxious presence. Was there any greater example of that than Christ? I mean, do you know who I am? You know what I can do to you? Right? If you haven't read the scriptures lately, watch Chosen, if nothing else. I mean, you know, this non-anxious presence of Christ. And so we can have that about change. And we can have that on this journey. You have the opportunity, and we have the opportunity as leaders in the church in the United States. You just came through something that church history in the U.S. had never seen before. Never. We've never been shut down like that. Now they've seen other stuff, little things, like the Great Depression and World War I, World War II, and all kinds of Spanish. I mean, it's not that. But if we're all at the table, they've never experienced what you just experienced, and here you are. You're here. You're still standing. So many of you are actually reporting momentum. It's different. It's weird. It's not metrically like it used to be, and yet in many cases giving is up. It's a weird moment. This is your opportunity. You have an opportunity. We have an opportunity as leaders to do things on this journey that are going to set the tone for the next 50 or 100 years. So we need to be aware of that. This is Dick Jones. Dick was a member for 60 years of Chicago First. He passed away just a few months ago, but when I got there in 2012, he was one of the first people that I wanted to spend some time with. He was the president of Sears and Roebuck back in the day, in the 70s. Dick, longtime Nazarene, had started when he was a student at Olivet Nazarene University, working in the paint department of a Sears store in Kankakee, and literally worked his way up to the top of the Sears Tower. President. You'll find Wall Street Journal articles on him. He's the architect of the Discover card, which won't mean a lot to you right now. But when Sears and Roebuck launched a Discover card, they became the biggest bank in the world. Wow. That was him. And there he was in my congregation. So I asked for lunch with him and Bob Wall, another business leader. We went out and I said, Mr. Jones, he was complimentary and we talked. And he always had one battle cry, by the way: I wish preachers preach more on holiness. There was always, when I would say, so what do you think? And he'd say, I love everything. I wish preachers preach more. He never said, I wish you. He just, you know, a little indirect. But so Dick, I could talk for a long time. Dick was just a godly, wonderful man. But we're sitting there, and he goes, what question do you have for me? I said, well, you have led change. He goes, yeah, a little. I'm like, so what's the biggest mistake a leader makes when they're navigating or leading change? And he said to me, Pastor, you know what those are. Tell me what you think the mistakes are. And I said, okay. You can go too fast. Yeah, that's a good one. Go too slow. Yeah, that's a good one. You can not listen to people, not get there. That's all good. Yeah, that's good. What else? At this point, I'm like, man, I want to be smart. I said, those are the kind of things that come to mind. He goes, well, the stuff that you just mentioned are mistakes. And by the way, if you lead change, you're going to make every single one of them. You will. You're going to try not to. But you're going to get to a point where you go, I wasn't listening. Or you're going to get to a point where you're going, we're going too fast, slow down. Or we're going too slow. Those are all very recoverable and part of the game. There's one mistake that if you make this, you can't come back from. And he just sat back. He said, let me tell you a story. 1974. He said, I'm president of Sears at the time, or it may have been a little later, I don't remember what the date was, but I'm president of Sears. Limo comes to pick me up to take me to my office in the Sears Tower. On the way to work, we stop by a hotel and pick up our East Coast vice president, who's in for meetings with me. He gets in the car, we head into Chicago, and I ask him, how do you think things are going? He goes, I think things are going great. We're doing this and we're doing this. At that point in time, those of you who are my age know that they were building these smaller malls all across the countryside, and usually there was a Sears that was part of the chain of 2 or 3. And he said, Bob, I hear you, but I'm watching Sam Walton. Have you seen what Sam's doing? He's like, well, Sam's a different mark. He goes, Sam is just doing things way different than we are. And he said, my East Coast vice president leaned in and looked at me and said, Dick, all we need to do is to keep doing what we're doing and get better at it. He said, here's the thing, Brian, the pastor. The mistake you can't come back from is if you think things aren't changing anyway. He said the president of Sears, and it's been several years ago, doesn't have a limo to pick them up anymore. They don't have an office in the tower. He said, do you know when Sears and Roebuck closed down their catalog company? He gave me, I believe the date was 1991. Do you know when Amazon launched? 1992. Or maybe it was 2001, 2000. Within a year. He goes, I was gone by then, but we had everything we needed to be Amazon. It was all there. But we just were trying to keep doing what we're doing and getting better at it. So, we've all driven by pictures of this. I don't say this when I'm in churches. I'm tempted to, but I don't. Jesus, what do we believe about the church? The gates of hell aren't going to prevail against the church. The church is going to be fine. The devil's not going to close our churches. He's not going to close churches. Ours may close, for sure, because we're on a battlefield. And we've got to be strategic. And God, if God can't use us, he'll use another group. He'll use somebody else. But it's this whole idea of getting ourselves to a place where we go, change is not our enemy. Change is our pathway to victory. And we don't need to change the gospel. It's fine. We just need to modify and think about how we're delivering the gospel. And our day-to-day routines and what we think is most important and what we're measuring as we go along the way. All right, here's my my Jocko moment here. Extreme Ownership is just simply one of the best books I've read, period. He's a former Navy SEAL, and of course he looks like a Navy SEAL, and if you listen to his podcast, there's always, he's interviewing people. He interviewed a guy who had been a Navy SEAL on a mission in Afghanistan who had gotten a leg blown off. And came back, and they were fitted in with a prosthetic after months and months and months of surgery, right? And they said, so what do you want to do? What method of retirement? He goes, I'm not retiring, I'm going back to the team. He's like, you can't go back to the team, you don't have a leg. He goes, you guys make legs. Make me one. And it was the first time it happened. I don't know if it's happened since, but the story of this guy is that he literally qualified, did everything physically that any other soldier did with a prosthetic. Jumping off a 6-foot tower. I mean, it was just an incredible story. He's an animal, right? And so much so that when he had his last interview to get back on the team, I mean, he went back and did make it. It's incredible. He said, I always had, and Jocko said, well, what happens if a bolt comes out of your leg? He goes, I got 2 more legs in my backpack. He says, I went before him and they said, well, you've only got 1 leg. What if your leg gets shot off? He goes, if my leg gets shot off, I got 2 more in my backpack. I can fix this one. What happens if you get your leg shot off? But this extreme ownership is the idea. And the first chapter of this book is a mission that he oversaw, that Jocko oversaw, where there were soldiers killed by friendly fire, which is the ultimate no-no or disgrace or whatever for a Navy SEAL, and he leads the book by telling the story about what he's responsible for. It's just a great book on ownership. And so part of what I'm asking us to do is to own what we do. Are you familiar with the term cowboy up? I mean, or cowgirl up, or that kind of stuff? We'll give you a new one. We need to Chalfant up, like E.O. Chalfant up. E.O. Chalfant, when he was pastor of Westside here in Indy, got elected or appointed or whatever they did in 1929 there it is on the back. 1922, September 3rd, 1922, preached his first message at Chicago First as a DS. And here were the 3 points to his message. And he uses language that we get all wiggy about, but just get over it. We're going to use it for now. Like successful. What's successful? It's okay. Number 1, a man, and it was a Christian who is successful. This was the title of the sermon. Christian is a Christian who goes for a vision that is sane, yet seemingly insane. It's somebody who chooses to go after something that is sane to them, insane to everybody around them. You ever had an idea and people went, well, that's a cute idea. You should. Number 2 is 1922. A person who is successful in a Christian life has an activity that is superhuman. They're just in. They're on. They're after it. And I'm not talking about working yourself to death. I'm not talking about being a workaholic. Most of the problems I've had when I was in what you might think was a workaholic stage, it was me not using time very wisely. You know, but there's an activity. That was number 2. Number 3, Yo Chow. A person who is successful in the Christian vision has a vision that borders on mania. And by mania, I mean crazy. It's 1922, right? And he commits, he says, we're going to plant 100 churches in Chicago. He said to Pastor Sherman. And Pastor, you're going to help us plant the first one. And a few weeks later, Chicago North Side, they began to work on that. Now, while he was there, E.O. Chow, you got to remember that Chicago Central District at that point in time probably wasn't even called that. It was Midwest or whatever. Several different states. I mean, you were part of that district at that time. They planted 270 churches in 300 communities. And he didn't have a car for the first 6 years he was there. So, we need to brizzy up or chowpin up. And I have my days like everybody else does. Trust me, I don't live on that mountain. One of the things that Jocko talks about is he says when he trained Navy SEALs, he would put these young leaders and they would get into a situation where they had some kind of mission and they were about it, and then they would plan for everything to go wrong, right? I mean, that's part of the training. Everything's gonna go wrong. And he said, and I would run up to these guys, and there'd be all kinds of stuff happening, you know, bombs going off or whatever, and all kinds of stuff. You know, it was safe, but it was training, but nevertheless, it was chaos. And they knew in their SEAL training that lots riding on it. And I would say, soldier, tell me what's happening. And they would say, sir, everything, we got this, we got this, and we got this, and this has happened, and I lost this. And he said, then I would look at them, and you can watch this on a video. I would look at them and say, what are you going to do as a leader? And folks, that's where we are. The people who are attending our churches, many of them have given a lifetime of tithes and offerings. They have given service. They have done everything that they can possibly do. Generation after generation they've given. And pastors who've gone before us have paid sacrifices. I'll tell you what, it was different growing up in a parsonage in 1970 than it is today. It was different. Salaries were different. The folks who've gone before us have done incredible work. So what are we going to do? So I'm going to challenge you very practically now. There is on your table several sheets of paper. One of them has to do with the fall cohort. We're going to offer more of these in the spring, but this fall there's 2 online cohorts that you could choose to be a part of. One of them has to do with connecting to community, and that's Jay Height. I didn't put any biographical information for Jay. I trust everybody knows Jay. What an incredible resource he is. And in 2020, it took a presidential declaration for local church to be deemed essential to public life in the United States. Think about that. Many people considered that a political move. It wasn't the communities that demanded that we were essential. What if, in essence, Washington told your town churches matter? What if we lived out the gospel and it was the other way around? Connecting to our community. You'll see some dates there for some online Zoom cohorts that can meet during that time. That's something you can do. Secondly, I don't know how many of you know Andy Hughes. Andy was working on a church plant in Fishers. I put his whole biography here just because it'll help you understand the potential help that we have in Andy. Andy works as a Chief Innovation Officer right now full-time at AAA Hoosier Motor Club. The rest of his stuff is there. He's been in ministry for a long, long time. Stepped out of ministry because his son had a medical condition several years ago that they needed to get some additional help for. And so he went into business and just began to help in church and was trying to help us plant in Fishers when 2020 came. And so he's reigniting. I spent some time with Andy If you're thinking innovation, if you're thinking adaptation, I love what he writes. Wesley Palmer, Bazee, God used these individuals as a conduit for new work to deliver our timeless holiness message about transformation in an inventive way, and it changed the world. Are we willing to be his next instrument? Do we have enough faith in God to believe that the originator of creativity can use us in an innovative way to deliver the gospel to our world? Do we really believe God can do a new thing in our community, our church? Have we lost confidence in God's ability? So these are two things you can do. These are steps that you can take. These are within your ability to control. And I get it. We're all busy. I don't know what that word actually is defined to mean. But generally, what are you going to do would be my question. So that's one opportunity that I would encourage you to take. I was at Olivet for a couple days, and Dr. Chenoweth said, when Roe v. Wade come down, I knew instantly that we better do something. Because for 50 years, the evangelical right has been bemoaning this movement, and now that law has been turned, what are we going to do to get active in support? How are we going to engage? And so I would challenge every single church, without exception, regardless of size, to do something to help a local pregnancy center, or do something. Olivet has purchased some housing. They're teaming up with the Crisis Pregnancy Center there. They've got 5 houses or apartments or something that they have constructed that they're going to move young ladies into. They'll automatically get a job at Olivet, and they will walk them through about an 18-month process through. And so we can't all do that, but we can all do something. So and we should. I mean, it's time, right? So that's something that we can do. What kind of a prayer initiative might you have? I'm not talking about a lasting forever kind of thing where we get together and mostly eat breakfast, and then pray a prayer. I'm talking about what if you pulled your team together and said, as a church, here's a thing that we're going to pray about. Here's people that we're going to pray about. One of the best things I ever did was ask some of our folks, I said, if you have children or grandchildren that you're concerned about, and you want to pray for, I'd like to meet with you every Sunday at 4 o'clock. And we created a prayer initiative out of that, and we came together, and they would come back and report every week. And one of the things that we did for the first 2 months, they weren't allowed to trying to get them to come to church while we were praying for them. Don't invite them. Don't even bring it up. And the reasoning was, you've been doing that for a long time, and it's not working. So let's just stop. And inevitably, the parent would say, or grandparent would say, matter of fact, 2 weeks in, one of the ladies brought her adult daughter who had gotten saved during that time. And the parent or grandparent would say, I didn't even bring it up, they brought it up, right? So I don't care what the kind of prayer initiative is that you do, but that's something we can do, right? The Hey You tool, I need to move this through this quickly. The Hey You tool I come up with after a visit to the Indiana State Fair. Amen. Thank you, Phil. That's good food right there. I on a stick. Beautiful. And it is. I was surprised at actually how the best corn dog I ever ate was like $3. So we're in this like a convention center where there's vendors all over the place. And they're selling everything from popcorn to windows to hot tubs or whatever. And we kind of separated, and I'm walking down. I get to the end of the aisle, and I'm looking, and I hear, hey, you! And I turn around, and there's a lovely young woman who smiles at me. And I smile back. And she said, do you enjoy throwing away money? I said, no, I don't. She said, then why won't you let me talk to you about your windows? I said, I can't imagine why I would not let you talk. I didn't buy windows. I wish I could. I got her card. But I got home and I got to thinking, that's an interesting tool. What's your Hey You? If you turn on the back, I worked on mine as a district superintendent. Hey You. My mission is to help you fulfill yours. If I just, we used to call these in the business world decades ago an elevator speech. You just got a moment. What's your hey you? If you get your neighborhood's attention, let's suppose you figure it out, and the community looks at you. What is it? What do you help? In Chicago, we had this thing where we help parents win. What does that mean? We want to help you someday look back and have a minimal amount of regrets on raising your family and feel good about where your kids are. We can help you do that starting right now. We would say that to kindergartner parents. And we would say, so let's talk about 18 years old, you're dropping them off at college, you're getting in the car to go back home. What's a win for you at that point in time? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to do, right? Nehemiah 2:12 has been just a heart call for me. I slipped out during the night, taking only a few others with me. I had not told anyone the plans that God had put in my heart to do. I am so curious. I look at all the young people, I look at everybody I meet, and I wonder, what has God put in your heart to do? Our role is to help you do that. What's in your heart? An idea, a thought, a purpose, a hurt, a cause, a right, wrong to be righted, and I go down a list of a bunch of things. What makes you weep, Nehemiah? What makes you angry? And what are you going to do about it? We want to help. That's my hey you, right? I have no idea if this is going to help anybody else, but it helped me. And rather than talking about the same thing at the board meeting over and over and over and over again, defining your hey you can be helpful, and I'd love to help you if you need help on that. And then building culture. Building culture. I want to give you a paradigm real quick, and then I'm going to close with this building culture tool, and you're going to talk for a few minutes. Donald Miller, who wrote The Shack and Blue Like Jazz and some other stuff, interesting stuff over the years, there's a business side to him. And 5 years ago or so, my son Nick called me and said, "Hey, Dad, I saw this thing with Donald Miller, and you need to watch it." And he came on, and Donald Miller developed a paradigm for marketing, a paradigm for business that translates incredibly well when we think about what we do and how we do it. And specifically, it translates really, really well in how I intend to spend the rest of my life. Okay. Here's what Donald Miller said. Donald Miller says, every great story starts with a character, as a person. I mean, think about it. Fiction, nonfiction, Rocky, Star Wars, whatever. You meet this character, and they're unique, and they're a little rough around the edges. But there's something about them that you meet as they begin to develop. And then in every great story, the character answers a calling. And they go after it. They sacrifice, and there's a wrong that needs to be righted, and they're going to go get it. I think of first-year school teachers. I don't know if any of you know anybody in education, but you want to help somebody, just find any first-year school teacher and prop them up and wipe their bloody nose and help them, because that's somebody who answers a calling, right? Or a pastor answers a calling. But in every great story, this character says, I'm going to do something about this. And it starts off great because they're passionate and they're gifted and they're unique and they're going to go get it. And on the sheer force of will, they graduate, they get to church, they begin to experience something that's incredible, and then they have a problem. It's not like the other problems. They encounter a difficulty, and our potential hero hits a wall. You can hit it when you're 22, you can hit it when you're 62, but something happens, and suddenly your ability to navigate it, you can't do it. It's a mixture, usually, of something outside that comes against you, something unfair that happened, I wasn't right. That's not right. Something out of nowhere. It's usually a mixture of that and something inside that you've been able to go as far as you've been able to go, never actually deal with. Now, not for any of us, but there are pastors who struggle with pride. Or there's just a variety of things, right? Maybe a habit, whatever, and you're done. I've been there and thought, well, I guess I lost the anointing. Maybe I was never called to preach to begin with. This whole thing's a lie. In every great story, our character gets stuck. And one of two things happens. One of the things that happens is that our character becomes a victim. I would have, but a victim of others, a victim of themselves. I mean, being a victim, self-pity is an excellent hot tub to spend some time in. And if we can blame something, that's why I go back to Jocko, extreme ownership. If we can just say, well, you know, but here's what happens with every victim, according to Wangler. Every victim, if they allow it to define them, becomes a villain. Think about it. Think about the stories you know. If you've ever had anybody in your church who had a call and didn't answer it, they won't become a villain in the way Darth Vader. I'm not talking about that kind of a villain. But I'm talking about somebody who kind of wants to keep everything where it is. I've got a position, and if I lose that position, Darth Vader's a pretty good example. There's just this issue that comes. You can't be a victim without eventually beginning to work against, right? And that happens. And if we choose to be victim, I'm hanging on my wall, and I'm not knocking on wood because I'm not doing that. But hanging on my wall, I've got these words written: whatever happens, I am not a victim. You don't get to do that to me. And I will not do it to myself. Now, that's easy to write and hang on the wall. It might be different. There may be days I take it down for a day or so. Right? But in our greater moments, our victim who's stuck, Rocky, along comes a guide. And the guide shows up, and the guide is someone who sees the victim. They see the character, and they see what they were trying to do. And they have been a few places and done a few things. The guide is not the hero in the story. No, the guide's not the Messiah. The guide is just someone who God sends, I believe, into a moment and says, hi, what are you doing? Remember the angel that showed up for Elisha? What are you doing here, Elisha? Right? And the guide cares about the character and wants to help them to get up and go on. And so the guide then begins just to ask questions of the character. Why are you doing this? Why are you here to be? Why did you start? What happens if you quit? What happens if you give up? I get it. You're done. You want to quit? Okay. If you do, what are you going to do? And what happens? And what haven't you thought of? Are these all the options that you think you have? The guides in my life have asked question after question after question after question. And when they hit on the right question, I'm like, oh. Because the guide is not the hero of the story. The character is the hero of the story. You have young people in your church who are heroes on a mission. And they desperately need someone to come along and say, wait, you're not going? You're not going to university, or you're not going to do this, you're not going to pursue that, or what? Talk to me about that. This is what marriages need. Someone to come along. And so what the guide does is the guide, helps the character find a pathway. Think pathway. When you think about leading your local church, think pathway. I know God moves mountains. I know He can. I know. And there have been a few times when I feel like that's what He's done. Most of the time, when I've said, hey God, what are we going to do about this mountain? He said, lace up your boots. We're going to climb it. We're going to go around it. We're going to go through it. Think pathway. This isn't a cure thing. There's not a thing that we're going to bring to your church and in this moment and everything's, I mean, maybe God can do whatever He wants to do, but most of the time, was Peter on a pathway? Oh yeah. Were the disciples on a pathway? Yeah. Because it's on the pathway that He will teach us what we need to learn. And you're leading a church, it's on a pathway. And so the guide helps the character find a pathway to fulfill their calling and become a hero. And then the guide goes back along the pathway and looks for their next hero. What an incredible approach to youth ministry. What an incredible approach to family ministry. Because you know who the greatest heroes are that we need in our country today? It's parents. And we have a tendency to make heroes out of parents at their funeral, even if they're not. Right? I mean, we will strain to try and make something. And we can do this together. That's why we're interdependent. You're all guides. We're all guides, potentially. We're also characters. Some more than others. Characters who will get stuck and will need help. So as I look at the district superintendency, that's kind of what I think. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And that's an approach that can be helpful. I have 9 years, I believe. I turned 61. They mandate us to go right off into the sunset when we're 70. I had a great conversation with Dr. Blake a few weeks ago, and I don't remember what I called him for, but we were talking, and he began to just, he would freestyle a little bit. You ever been around Ron? He'd just start talking about something. It was so cool. And he said, Brother Brian, I would love to continue this conversation, but it's really time for me to get back in the pool. And so I'm looking forward to that day. That day's coming. What an incredible leader. I cannot tell you how grateful I am for his leadership, because you are some of the fruit of his leadership, and I'm humbled. But that day will come. Between now and then, I think, still learning, that building culture is really what we're going to be about. A district culture. So you have in front of you a building culture tool. And I'm going to give you a moment to ask me any questions you want to ask me before we do this, but this is the exercise that we're headed to. I used to do this with young couples in premarital counseling. I would say, so someday, 70 years from now, a minister's going to walk into a home and sit at a kitchen table or a dining room table, and your family's going to gather around, and the minister's going to say, because it's a funeral, tell me about mom. Tell me about dad. What was their marriage like? What was it like to grow up in their home? And the young couple will look at me like, and I'll say to them, what do you want them to say? Let's write it down right now. What do you want them to say? You begin with the end in mind, right? And then your role is to go make that true. I want to do a little bit of that with this culture building tool. 10 years from now, some of us will still be in the same place that we are, serving the same people. There's a few of us, like me, who will probably be doing something else or moving on. And so when I think about that future for me, my question is, what do I want the District Advisory Board to be talking about when I leave? What do you want your church boards to be talking about 10 years from now? And what kind of culture? Because I promise you, the culture we build at the church trumps everything else that we do. What's it like to be in the room? Have you ever went to a family gathering when something happened before you got there? And you were the only one that didn't know about it? And Aunt Susie and Aunt Becky got into an argument, and you're like, hey, what happened? That's what it's like sometimes to walk into some of our churches. Like, whoa. I had a friend one time that I played racquetball with who visited my church. He was an unbeliever. And he came. I asked him if he'd come 2 or 3 weeks, and I gave him something. I don't remember if I bought him dinner, gave him money, whatever. And I said, I just want you to come tell me what it's like to attend church. He goes, coming to your church was a little bit like being at your in-laws for the first time. They were friendly, but there was a lot. I had no idea what was going on. And I was definitely not in tune with everything that was being said or the joke. Culture, 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 culture. What's it like to pull up onto your parking lot? What's it like? What do you hear when you get out of the car? What do you see when you approach the door? So building culture. So here's some things I want you to think about, and you'll see them on this sheet of paper. Growing up on the Indy District as a student, what was it like to grow up on this district? What do you want them to say? What was it like to be a pastor's kid on the Indianapolis district? What was it like to pastor on the Indianapolis district? What was it like to move in? What was it like to make mistakes as a leader? What was it like to blow it on the Indianapolis district? What was it like to be a pastor's spouse? And I just want you to spend some time at your tables and just give me some phrases. Just give me something that will help me understand the kind of culture that you would love to see develop. And some of it's already here, for sure. And you don't need to tell me that. But just tell me what it is that what you want them to experience. A person of color. How do we navigate, and how do we come to a place where we're able to reach and move, and women in leadership, and what's it like to be a female, those kinds of things. What's it like to be in the first quarter of your ministry, the young guy or girl here? What's it like to be in the fourth quarter of your ministry? I want us to be a district that people want to come and retire from. And we're not riding anything. We're not treading water. This is a great place to finish really, really well, because we need mentors, and we need guides, and we need innovation at various age levels. And we need fourth quarter ministers who will bring along first quarter ministers, and so that they don't have to make the same mistakes that we make. I told a friend of mine who's just starting out, I said, my goal is that you not get the same scars I got. I want you to get new scars. Go, because we need that. We need you to go try stuff. Go do different stuff. Just don't get the same ones. It's stupid. Don't need to do that. I wrote a few other things down there. Be vocational. Bivocational. What's that feel like? I don't know what the Lord will do with it, but I want you to take a few moments. I have a couple things. What time is it? A couple things that, in addition, I want to share that are going to be part of, that I know right now are going to be part of our culture. Last fall, for several years, we got to be part of a network of pastors from North Point. We got to go down to Atlanta and spend some time with other senior pastors, with several different teams. A team from Fuller Theological Seminary that talked to us about youth. Dr. Kara something, yes, was with us, and she talked to us. And there were some other leaders, and Andy Stanley came out. And Andy's, for the last 30 years or so, has led North Point in Alpharetta, Georgia, and wrote a great book, by the way, Not In It to Win It. If you want a resource for navigating political time, oh my goodness, there's just not a better one than that. I highly recommend that you read that. But Andy come out, and Andy's caused controversy at times, but who doesn't? And so he came out, and there were only about 130 of us in the room, and he said, so here's what you guys need and ladies need to know. 30 years ago, me and a few of my friends got what we felt like was a nudge from God, and we answered a call, and we got permission from an existing church, his dad's church, First Baptist of Atlanta, to try something. that was unique and different. And it worked. And God blessed it. And it's been a great 30 years. Now I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting Andy. He goes, it's been a great 30 years. That's over. It's a new day. And I don't have a program or a plan or even a model for you to try and go assimilate into your context. Okay? Here's two things I know. Number one, he said, I'm thoroughly convinced that division is going to be the primary weapon of the enemy to destroy the church in America, to close them down. Division. We've never been terribly unified, but we're dealing with more division. And I don't know about you, but I had folks in my church, I just prayed they didn't talk politics before they got out of the room, because I knew, you have all of that, and you think about the racial division that we're dealing with, and all of those, because it's division. It's why in John 17, Jesus talks so much about unity over and over and over and over again. And from the New Living Translation, I love this. I in them and you are in me, he's praying. May they experience such perfect unity. Perfect unity. That's the kind of relationship that we're in a relationship, and it's laughable to think anything's going to break us up. It's crazy. The enemy's not even going to go there, because that's how unified we are. We don't agree, maybe. We disagree. Matter of fact, one of the great signs of unity is when you can disagree. When you can have tension in the room, and you can navigate all of that. We need unity at a Holy Spirit level that will enable us, regardless of what our brothers and sisters believe, and we're going, how could you possibly get there? We're unified. And we don't give up on anybody. And we're together. And we're going to help each other. And we're going to try together and fail together and cry together and laugh together, make mistakes together, put them back together, right? Unity. And I don't know for sure what that looks like. I'm not quite sure exactly how to make that happen. I only know that it's going to be a focus. We're going to be unified as the Lord helps me over the next 9 years. Secondly, I want you to watch this video real quick. This kind of unity I'm talking about. That's all I got. I didn't go to seminary. I like that. Man, I want to preach. Stop. Okay. Second thing was, he said the most important question that that we're dealing with as a church is, what's the faith of the next generation worth to you? In essence, he said we can no longer be a church that has youth departments. Yep. We are the youth department. That's what we do. It's now. And then he went through, so what's going to cost too much? I'm challenged with NYC. We need every single student that can possibly get there to get there, and I don't know how we're going to pay for it. But we need them there, because that's a transformational environment. That's a thing that will mark somebody for life. I thought I was at junior and senior high camp. Man, it's a whole other story. But what's it worth to us? What are we not willing to sit at the table and listen to? What are we not willing to risk? What are we not willing to give up? What are we not willing to lay aside? Those two things for me and they hit me in Georgia that day, and I went back and told Chicago First, and I said, hey, is it unity? And what's the faith of the next generation worth? And we changed the way that we were approaching staffing, and we began to include people in doing stuff that they'd never done before, and started with me and the amount of time I was in the pulpit. I mean, we just begin, I don't know what that looks like for you, but I believe these two things are gonna be critically important for us with regard to the future. Okay, so, any questions for me or comments? You don't have to have any, I'm not.
I would just piggyback on the youth section. I've just come across the book. There was a conference recently called Growing Young, and that book is tremendous. If you look it up, there's actually 2 books by 2 different authors, the same title, and I got both books, and they're both good. But
Growing Young.
the one is from Fuller University, I believe.
That's Kara. Yeah, Powell,
Yeah.
I think that's her, yeah.
And fantastic.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Anybody else? You can ask a totally unrelated question if you want to. This is my David Busick moment, when you come down in front of assembly. Ask me anything you want to ask me. All right. I have 3 copies of Canoeing the Mountains over there on that table that were sitting in the district office. If you haven't read that book, please pick it up and take it with you. Don't take it if you're not going to read it. Guilty of that. But if you're wondering navigation, how to do that, it's a great book. I'm Dr. Blake Bottom, so I know you've been familiar with that. I want to make that available to you. Okay, I'm going to pray. I'd like you to spend a few moments at the table helping me. I've never done this culture tool before, it's brand new, so you're gonna give me feedback on it. I'm gonna be able to refine it and help that. But give me some, have one person at the table write down some speaking points. And then I'll make a decision as to whether we're gonna come back together and hear them or not in a few minutes. But I'm gonna give you, what time do we usually get done?
11:30.
11:30? Okay. Let's take about 20 minutes and I'll come back and have you talk to me a little bit, the last few minutes there, and then we'll pray. All right, take a break if you need to, but then write down some talking points, assign a spokesman, and someone to record these, and then eventually you're gonna give these to Pam and she'll.